Hi there, and welcome to this worship leader training mini-series on values for worship in Antioch churches: accessible, prayerful, and passionate. Now, these three values flow from our vision and context, so if you haven't watched the previous three videos about that, now would be a great time to do that. First up, we'll look at making worship accessible. So why does this matter? Two things: mission and community. Antioch churches are planted in poorer areas of Greater Manchester, and Antioch churches are meant to make disciples in diverse contexts. So if all our gathered worship can only be understood by people who have a degree or who are fluent English speakers, we're probably not going to do what we're here to do. Second, community. Antioch churches are small, so worship has to be participation. If worship isn't accessible, we're just putting on a show and we're not growing as a community. So when we say we want to make worship accessible, we have to ask, accessible to whom? And it's tempting to say everyone, but that's not a possible or really a helpful goal for one church community. Three groups to keep in mind then when we talk about making worship accessible. Accessible to new leaders, accessible to the congregation, and accessible to newcomers, especially local people and the family, friends, and colleagues of your congregation. Accessible to new leaders means, could people in your congregation imagine themselves doing what you, the worship leader, is doing? Accessible to the congregation, can your congregation engage with worship and get to know God better through it? Accessible to newcomers, can someone new walk in and feel comfortable enough to stay or to come again? And by the way, accessible doesn't mean bland or simplistic or shallow. When I was an English teacher, our department used to say, we remove barriers, not content. And I find that quite helpful when thinking about church too. So how can we do this? How can we make worship accessible? Here are a few ideas. Gather people in prayer. When you lead the congregation in prayer as you come to lead worship, you change the tone. You welcome the Holy Spirit and you welcome people to engage with God and to be present. This really can help with the hearts and minds side of accessibility. Keep it simple, mostly. If your songs are full of complex language or your prayers are full of Christian jargon, it can be hard for someone new to engage, especially if English isn't their first language or they aren't used to church. So think about the words you use and the songs you sing. Now that doesn't mean you can't sing an 18th century hymn once in a while, but it does mean you might want to explain a few words, or to only have a couple of older hymns on your church song list. Which leads us to having and using a song list. It's really helpful for a congregation when there is a regular diet of songs that people can learn. We find about 20 to 25 songs works well for our churches, and we'll look at how to shape and use that song list in a later video. By the way, if you're introducing a new song, why not teach part of it first in the service, or even send a video or an audio file on your church WhatsApp group? Next, the low bar. This is a high jump metaphor. There is a low bar for leading worship in Antioch churches. You don't have to be a musical genius, and it's the heart that matters most anyway. This helps to make it accessible to new leaders. Now there is a low bar, but there is a bar. Because if you make worship too accessible to very new musicians, you can end up making it less accessible to the congregation. Next, preparation. Preparation builds confidence, and confidence increases accessibility. If the worship leader feels confident and relaxed and well prepared, the congregation is more likely to feel relaxed, open, and able to engage. The reverse is also true. So, for musicians, it's good to practice. For leaders using YouTube, choose your videos carefully, skip the adverts in advance. Multi-lingual worship. Antioch churches sing in English most of the time, but not always. City Life Church, Hope Church, for example, sometimes sing a chorus or a song in two languages. sometimes one language after the other, sometimes both at the same time. And having a translation with lyrics on the screen helps everyone to know what they're singing. Another example, New Life Church in Salford had a wonderful birthday celebration with people bringing songs from Iran, Nigeria, South India, and elsewhere. So if you're part of a worship team with more than one language represented, why not speak to your other worship leaders about bringing a song or a chorus in a language other than English? Let's sum up. Accessibility is part of mission, and accessibility is part of community. Think about how you can make worship accessible to new leaders, accessible to the congregation, and accessible to newcomers. In the next video, we'll look at the next value, making worship prayerful. See you then.